You know, I'm honestly surprised just how many comments I get almost every single day asking me what a LOLcow is. Now, it's not uncommon for normies to accidentally stumble upon what we would refer to as internet culture, and I'm using that in very ironic quotations, trust me. So, for those of you that are fucking stupid, here's the answer. According to Urban Dictionary, a LOLcow is a person or group of people laughed at for actions that they make, despite not trying to be funny. They may try to take themselves seriously, but are often milked for laughs with or without their knowledge. Yeah, and that's basically just the gist of it. Well, that was unexpected. Clothes don't look half bad at least. Anyway, I'll get onto that later. Personally, I would argue that there are 3 points that would make somebody a LOLcow. First up would be narcissism, next up would be a lack of self-awareness, and the third part would be an inability to learn from past mistakes. Humor can be derived from all 3 of these things. However, most if not all 3 attributes are going to apply to any LOLcow you may find. Regardless if a cow has all 3 attributes, they almost always have a lack of self-awareness. That is ultimately the key factor that determines if somebody is going to be possible for a good old-fashioned milking. For laughs, I mean. I guess you could say the LOLcows are the natural evolution of those old YouTube compilations of people getting hurt and doing dumb shit. We considered it funny and quite shocking for the time, sending it to our friends and letting it spread all around online. But I think you know what I'm getting at. Let's break down the 3 points, starting with narcissism. Just a quick Google search gives us the baseline of what narcissism actually is. Narcissism is an excessive interest in or admiration for oneself in one's physical appearance. In psychology, it means selfishness, involving a sense of entitlement, lack of empathy, and a need for admiration, as characterizing by a personality type. For psychoanalysis, it says self-centeredness arising from failure to distinguish the self from external objects, either in very young babies or as a feature of a mental disorder. Really, we shouldn't be using Google as our first source, because of course these definitions are only surface level. We're going to need to actually look into the DSM-5. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, shortened to the DSM-5. It's a product of more than 10 years of effort by hundreds of international experts in all aspects of mental health. So, naturally, this would be the best place to look if we're not going to consult professionals ourselves. And of course, I need to preface this, I am not a doctor. I am not qualified to give any sort of actual diagnosis. However, I have the tools to at least attempt to do so. An armchair psychologist, if you will. The first place we can start is histrionic personality disorder. It's a pervasive pattern of excessive emotionality and attention-seeking, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. A. Is uncomfortable in situations in which he or she is not the center of attention. B. Interaction with others is often characterized by inappropriate sexually seductive or provocative behavior. C. Displays rapidly shifting and shallow expression of emotions. D. Constantly uses physical appearance to draw attention to self. E. Has a style of speech that is excessively impressionistic and lacking in detail. F. Shows self-dramatization, theatricality, and exaggerated expression of emotion. G. Is suggestible, an example easily influenced by others or circumstances. And H. Considers relationships to be more intimate than they actually are. Gee, I'd imagine that most LOLcows have that problem. They all tend to revel in it, rolling around in the pity and the humor that people are deriving from them. Some actually thrive by being pitied or laughed at, which is kinda sick when you think about it, while others begin to loathe it, despising what people are saying or thinking about them. Regardless of what they say though, they all thrive on the attention in one way or another. Moving forward, associated features supporting diagnosis. Individuals with histrionic personality disorder may have difficulty achieving emotional intimacy in romantic or sexual relationships without being aware of it. They often act out a role, like the victim or princess, in their relationships to others. They may also seek to control their partner through emotional manipulation or seductiveness on one level, while displaying marked dependency on them at another level. Individuals with this disorder have often impaired relationships with same-sex friends because their sexually provocative interpersonal style may seem a threat to their friends' relationships. These individuals may also alienate friends with demands for constant attention, They often become depressed and upset when they are not the center of attention. They may crave novelty, stimulation, and excitement and have a tendency to become bored with their usual routine. These individuals are often intolerant of, or frustrated by, situations that involve delayed gratification, and their actions are often directed at obtaining immediate satisfaction. Although they often initiate a job or project with great enthusiasm, their interest may lag quickly. Longer-term relationships may be neglected to make way for the excitement of new relationships. The actual risk of suicide, however, is not known, but clinical experience suggests that individuals with this disorder are at an increased risk for suicidal gestures and threats to get attention and coerce better caregiving. Histrionic personality disorder has been associated with higher rates of somatic symptom disorder, conversion disorder, functional neurological symptom disorder, and major depressive disorder. Borderline, narcissistic, antisocial, independent personality disorders often co-occur. The first LOLcow that comes to mind to me is Nikocado Avocado. In his videos, we can see him rushing through a different series of emotions, through genuine happiness, to anger, to sadness. But then again, it could all just be an act. However, he does like to show his nasty, weird, pussy-looking butthole on OnlyFans. His actions are constantly muddied by this flamboyant act that he puts on for the camera, believing that he is being entertaining and engaging for his viewers, not realizing that it's actually turning people off from his content and making them actually want him to fuck up. This is why we see so many people critiquing him for all kinds of things beyond just his eating habits. In the context about the person with the disorder having some sort of manipulation plan against their partner, well, it fits Nikocado's relationship. Supposedly, Orlin has left him. I don't know if that's true, but seeing all the manipulation going back and forth between those two, it's safe to assume that they both might have this disorder. Or it could just be one really clever but ultimately self-destructive character that they're playing. The world may never know. The next possible disorder in this category is narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of grandiosity in fantasy or behavior, need for admiration, and lack of empathy, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. A. Has a grandiose sense of self-importance, like exaggerating achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements. B. Is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. C. Believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high-status people or institutions. D. Requires excessive admiration. E. Has a sense of entitlement, such as unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment, or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. F. Is interpersonally exploitative, takes advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends. G. Lacks empathy, is unwilling to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. H. Is often envious of others, or believes that others are often envious of him or her. I. Shows arrogant, haughty beliefs or attitudes. The additional features of this diagnosis are: vulnerability in self-esteem makes individuals with narcissistic personality disorder very sensitive to injury from criticism or defeat. Although they may not show it outwardly, criticism may haunt these individuals and may leave them feeling humiliated, degraded, hollow, and empty. They may react with disdain or defiant counterattack. Such experiences often lead to social withdrawal or an appearance of humility that may mask and protect the grandiosity. Interpersonal relationships are typically impaired because of problems derived from entitlement, the need for admiration, and the relative disregard for the sensitivities of others. Though overweening ambition and confidence may lead to high achievement, performance may be disrupted because of intolerance of criticism or defeat. Sometimes vocational functioning can be very low, reflecting an unwillingness to take a risk in competitive or other situations in which defeat is possible. Sustained feelings of shame or humiliation and the attendant self-criticism may be associated with social withdrawal and persistent depressive disorder or major depressive disorder. In contrast, sustained periods of grandiosity may be associated with a hypomanic mood. Narcissistic personality disorder is also associated with anorexia nervosa and substance use disorders, especially related to cocaine. Histrionic, borderline, antisocial, and paranoid personality disorders may be associated with narcissistic personality disorder. A LOLcow that really fits this description would likely be Darkside Phil. He seems to think that he's better than everybody else, and that even video games are beneath him. He's better than the games, and anytime something goes wrong, he isn't at fault. It's the video game, it's the developers, it's a bunky mess. Everything has bugged mechanics. There is no way at all the people that are criticizing him have any actual basis to their arguments. It's all bullshit. But we know that ain't the truth. The next major point on the triad would be a lack of self-awareness, with the first disorder being borderline personality disorder. It's a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image, and affects, and marked impulsivity, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. 1. Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. 2. A pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships, characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. 3. Identity disturbance, markedly and persistently unstable self-image or sense of self. 4. Impulsivity in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging, such as spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating. 5. Recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures or threats, or self-mutilating behavior. 6. Affective instability due to marked reactivity of mood, like intense episodic dysphoria, irritability, or anxiety usually lasting a few hours and only rarely more than a few days. 7. Chronic feelings of emptiness. 8. Inappropriate, intense anger, or difficulty controlling anger, such as frequent displays of temper, constant anger, recurrent physical fights. 9. Transient, stress-related paranoid ideation, or severe dissociative symptoms. Additional features of this diagnosis are: individuals with borderline personality disorder may have a pattern of undermining themselves at the moment a goal is about to be realized, such as dropping out of school just before graduation, regressing severely after discussion of how well therapy is going, destroying a good relationship just when it is clear that the relationship could last, etc., etc. Some individuals develop psychotic-like symptoms, such as hallucinations, body image distortions, ideas of reference, and hypnagogic phenomena during times of stress. Individuals with this disorder may feel more secure with transitional objects, like a pet or an inanimate possession, than in interpersonal relationships. Premature death from suicide may occur in individuals with this disorder, especially in those with co-occurring depressive disorders or substance abuse disorders. Physical handicaps may result from self-inflicted abuse behaviors or failed suicide attempts. Recurrent job losses, interrupted education, and separation or divorce are common. Physical and sexual abuse, neglect, hostile conflict, and early parental loss are common in the childhood histories of those with borderline personality disorder. Common co-occurring disorders include depressive and bipolar disorders, substance use disorders, eating disorders, notably bulimia nervosa, post-traumatic stress disorder, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Borderline personality disorder also frequently co-occurs with other personality disorders. One cow that comes to mind is certainly Onision. We've seen over the years how he has gone from YouTube star to being universally hated because he's absolutely batshit fucking insane. We've seen him lose control, freaking out on video, made threats of self-harm or harming others, constant abuse of his spouses, so on and so forth. There's really no way that I can say anything flattering about him. He's really just that out there. The next disorder under a lack of self-awareness is schizophrenia. According to the documents, 2 or more of the following, each present for a significant portion of time during a 1-month period or less if successfully treated. At least one of these must be A, B, or C. Delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech such as frequent derailment or incoherence, grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior, and negative symptoms, such as diminished emotional expression or avolition. For a significant portion of the time since the onset of the disturbance, level of functioning in one or more major areas such as work, interpersonal relations, or self-care is markedly below the level achieved prior to the onset, or when the onset is in childhood or adolescence. There is failure to achieve expected level of interpersonal, academic, or occupational functioning. Continuous signs of the disturbance persist for at least 6 months. This 6-month period must include at least 1 month of symptoms, or less if successfully treated, that meet criterion 2A, which would be active phase symptoms, and may include periods of prodromal or residual symptoms. During these prodromal or residual periods, the signs of the disturbance may be manifested by only negative symptoms or by 2 or more symptoms listed in criterion 2A in the attenuated form, such as odd beliefs or unusual perceptual experiences. Schizoaffective disorder and depressive or bipolar disorder with psychotic features have been ruled out because of their either 1. No major depressive or manic episodes have occurred concurrently with the active phase symptoms, or 2. If mood episodes have occurred during active phase symptoms, they have been present for a minority of the total duration of the active and residual periods of the illness. The disturbance is not attributable to the psychological effects of a substance. Additional features. Individuals with schizophrenia may display inappropriate affect, like laughing in the absence of an appropriate stimulus, a dysphoric mood that can take the form of depression, anxiety, or anger, a disturbed sleep pattern, like daytime sleeping and nighttime activity, and a lack of interest in eating food or food refusal. Depersonalization, derealization, and somatic concerns may occur and sometimes reach delusional proportions. Anxiety and phobias are common. Cognitive deficits in schizophrenia are common and are strongly linked to vocational and functional impairments. These deficits can include decrements to declarative memory, working memory, language function, and other executive functions, as well as slower processing speed, as well as reductions in attention are also found. Some individuals with schizophrenia show social cognition deficits, including deficits in the ability to infer the intentions of other people, theory of mind, and may attend to and then interpret irrelevant events or stimuli as meaningful, perhaps leading to the generation of explanatory delusions. These impairments frequently persist in symptomatic remission. Some individuals with psychosis may lack insight or awareness of the disorder. This lack of insight includes unawareness of symptoms of schizophrenia and may be present throughout the entire course of the illness. Unawareness of the illness is typically a symptom of schizophrenia itself rather than a coping strategy. It is comparable to the lack of awareness of neurological deficits following brain damage, termed anosognosia. This symptom is the most common predictor of non-adherence to treatment, and it predicts higher relapse rates, increased number of involuntary treatments, poor psychological functioning, aggression, and poorer course of illness. Hostility and aggression can be associated with schizophrenia, although spontaneous and random assaulting is uncommon. Aggression is more frequent for younger males and for individuals with past history of violence, non-adherence with treatment, substance abuse, and impulsivity. It should be noted that the vast majority of persons with schizophrenia are non-aggressive and are more frequently victimized than are individuals in the general population. Currently, there are no radiological, laboratory, or psychometric tests for the disorder. Differences are evident in multiple brain regions between groups of healthy individuals and persons with schizophrenia, including evidence from neuroimaging, neuropathological, and neurophysiological studies. Differences are also evident in cellular architecture, white matter connectivity, and gray matter volume in a variety of regions such as the prefrontal and temporal cortices. Reduced overall brain volume has been observed, as well as increased brain volume reduction with age. Brain volume reductions with age are more pronounced in individuals with schizophrenia than in healthy individuals. Finally, individuals with schizophrenia appear to differ from individuals without the disorder in eye tracking and electrophysiological indices. Neurological soft signs common in individuals with schizophrenia include impairments in motor coordination, sensory integration, and motor sequencing of complex movements, left-right confusion, and disinhibition of associated movements. In addition, minor physical anomalies of the face and limbs may occur. Functional consequences of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is associated with significant social and occupational dysfunction. Making educational progress and maintaining employment are frequently impaired by avolition or other disorder manifestations, even when the cognitive skills are sufficient for the task at hand. Most individuals are employed at a lower level than their parents, and most, particularly in men, do not marry or have limited social contacts outside of their family. And I think it goes without saying that this section is mainly focused on Terry Davis. We all know that he created God's perfect temple. He had divine intellect and created his own operating system from the ground up, including its own programming language and compiler, which is no simple feat. He believes that God contacted him and wanted him to fill out God's prophecy, whatever that may have been. He would spend all of his time at home, pecking away at the plastic of his keyboard, yelling at his parents during his episodes, bothering people walking down the street if they just so happened to have a different skin complexion than he did. And also that the CIA was trying to take him out. The glow-in-the-dark CIA fellers, I guess we'll say. And now we're on to the final point of the triad, an inability to learn from mistakes. The disorder that best fits this category is intellectual developmental disorder. Intellectual disability, also known as intellectual development disorder, is a disorder with onset during the developmental period that includes both intellectual and adaptive functioning deficits in conceptual, social, and practical domains. The following 3 criteria must be met. Deficits in intellectual functions, such as reasoning, problem-solving, planning, abstract thinking, judgment, academic learning, and learning from experience, confirmed by both clinical assessments and individualized standardized intelligence testing. Deficits in adaptive functioning that result in failure to meet developmental and socio-cultural standards for personal independence and social responsibility without ongoing support. The adaptive deficits limit functioning in one or more activities of daily life, such as communication, social participation, and independent living, across multiple environments, such as home, school, work, and community. Onset intellectual adaptive deficits during the developmental period. Intellectual disability is a heterogeneous condition with multiple causes. There may be associated difficulties with social judgment, assessment of risk, self-management of behavior, emotions, or interpersonal relationships, or motivation in school or work environments. Lack of communication skills may predispose to disruptive and aggressive behaviors. Gullibility is often a feature, involving naivete in social situations and tendency for being easily led by others. Gullibility and lack of self-awareness risk may result in exploitation by others, and possible victimization, fraud, unintentional criminal involvement, false confessions, and risk of physical and sexual abuse. These associated features can be important in criminal cases, including Atkins-type hearings involving the death penalty. And the most relevant LOLcow for this has to be Christian. Time and time again, we saw how he just couldn't learn from his mistakes or what people were putting him through. Every single time a new gal pal showed up, he would jump straight up and try to woo her. But of course, it was always some troll fucking with him. He just seemed to be unable to recognize the pattern that was constantly happening throughout his life until way late into adulthood. But even then, he still continuously fell for trolls. Hell, he was convinced by a kid to stuff a medallion up his ass. So who knows what Chris is capable of? As we know from recent history, it's certainly a lot more than we anticipated. There are, however, a few disorders that don't actually fully fit onto this triad. The first one should be quite obvious, and it is autism spectrum disorder. This is persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts, as manifested by the following, currently or by history. Deficits in social emotional reciprocity, ranging, for example, from abnormal social approach and failure of normal back and forth conversation, to reduced sharing of interest, emotions, or affect, to failure to initiate or respond to social interactions. Deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interactions, ranging, for example, from poorly integrated verbal and nonverbal communication to abnormalities in eye contact and body language, or deficits in understanding and use of gestures, to a total lack of facial expressions and nonverbal communication. Additionally, there are deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships, ranging, for example, from difficulties adjusting behavior to suit various social contexts to difficulties in sharing imaginative play or in making friends, to absence of interest in peers. Restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities as manifested by at least 2 of the following, currently or by history. Stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech, such as simple motor movements, lining up toys or flipping objects, so on and so forth. Insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines, or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior, like extreme distress from small changes, difficulties with transitions, rigid thinking patterns, greeting rituals, need to take same route or eat same food every day. Highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus, like strong attachment to or preoccupation with unusual objects, excessively circumscribed or perseverative interest. Hyper or hyperactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment, like apparent indifference to pain and temperature, adverse response to specific sounds or textures, excessive smelling or touching of objects, visual fascination with lights or movement. Symptoms must be present in the early development period, but may not become fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacities, or may be masked by learned strategies in later life. Symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning. Many individuals with autism spectrum disorder also have intellectual impairment and/or language impairment, slow to talk, language comprehension behind production, etc., etc. Even those with average or high intelligence have an uneven profile of abilities. The gap between intellectual and adaptive functional skills is often large. Motor deficits are often present, including odd gait, clumsiness, and other abnormal motor signs. such as walking on tiptoes. Self-injury, like headbanging, biting the wrist, may occur, and disruptive or challenging behaviors are common in children and adolescents with autism spectrum disorder than other disorders, including intellectual disability. Adolescents and adults with autism spectrum disorder are prone to anxiety and depression. Some individuals develop catatonic-like motor behavior, slowing and freezing mid-action. But these are typically not of the magnitude of a catatonic episode. However, it is possible for individuals with autism spectrum disorder to experience a marked deterioration in motor symptoms and display a full catatonic episode with symptoms such as mutism, posturing, grimacing, and waxy flexibility. The risk period for comorbid catatonia appears to be the greatest in the adolescent years. Functional consequences of ASD include, in young children with autism spectrum disorder, lack of social and communication abilities may hamper learning, especially learning through social interaction or in settings with peers. In the home, insistence on routines and aversion to change, as well as sensory sensitivities, may interfere with eating and sleeping and make routine care, like haircuts, dental work, extremely difficult. Adaptive skills are typically below measured IQ. Extreme difficulties in planning, organization, and coping with change negatively impact academic achievement, even for students with above-average intelligence. During adulthood, these individuals may have difficulties establishing independence because of continued rigidity and difficulty with novelty. Many individuals with autism spectrum disorder, even without intellectual disability, have poor adult psychological functioning as indexed by measures such as independent living and gainful employment. Functional consequences in old age are unknown, but social isolation and communication problems, like reduced help-seeking, are likely to have consequences for health in older adulthood. Obviously, we see this in Chris, with how he gets fixated on his Sonichu characters. This ties in very deeply with his inability to break any sort of routine. Well, his routine of not doing anything. And the last notable disorder would be antisocial personality disorder. This is a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others, occurring since age 15 years, as indicated by 3 or more of the following. A failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors, as indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. Deceitfulness, as indicated by repeatedly lying, use of aliases, or conning others for personal profit or pleasure. Impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. Irritability and aggressiveness, as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. Reckless disregard for safety for self or others. Consistent irresponsibility, as indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior or honor financial obligations. Lack of remorse, as indicated by being indifferent to or rationalizing having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another. The individual is at least 18 years. There is evidence of conduct disorder with onset before age 15 years. The occurrence of antisocial behavior is not exclusively during the course of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Individuals with antisocial personality disorder frequently lack empathy and tend to be callous, cynical, and contemptuous of the feelings, rights, and sufferings of others. They may have an inflated or arrogant self-appraisal, like they feel that ordinary work is beneath them, or lack a realistic concern about their current problems or their future, and may be excessively opinionated, self-assured, or cocky. They may display a glib, superficial charm and can be quite voluble and verbally facile, like using technical terms or jargon that might impress someone who is unfamiliar with the topic. Lack of empathy, inflated self-appraisal, and superficial charm are features that have been commonly included in traditional conceptions of psychopathy that may be particularly distinguishing of the disorder and more predictive of recidivism in prison or forensic settings, where criminal, delinquent, or aggressive acts are likely to be non-specific. These individuals may also be irresponsible and exploitative in their sexual relationships. They may have a history of many sexual partners and may never have sustained a monogamous relationship. They may be irresponsible as parents, as evidenced by malnutrition of a child, an illness in the child resulting from a lack of minimal hygiene, a child's dependence on neighbors or non-resident relatives for food or shelter, a failure to arrange for a caretaker for a young child when the individual is away from home, or repeated squandering of money required for household necessities. These individuals may receive dishonorable discharges from the armed services, may fail to be self-supporting, may become impoverished or even homeless, or may spend many years in penal institutions. Individuals with antisocial personality disorder are more likely than other people in the general population to die prematurely by violent means, such as suicide, accidents, and homicides. Individuals with antisocial personality disorder may also experience dysphoria, including complaints of tension, inability to tolerate boredom. They may have associated anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, substance abuse disorders, somatic symptom disorder, gambling disorder, and other disorders of impulse control. Individuals with antisocial personality disorder also often have personality features that meet criteria for other personality disorders, particularly borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic personality disorders. The likelihood of developing antisocial personality disorder in adult life is increased if the individual experienced childhood onset of conduct disorder before age 10 years and accompanying attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Child abuse or neglect, unstable or erratic parenting, or inconsistent parental discipline may increase the likelihood that conduct disorder will evolve into antisocial personality disorder. And who does this fit the most? Well, that's easy. It's Isabella Loretta Jenke. She manipulated Chris Chan to get him to do all kinds of awful, gross shit. It manipulated people close to her to run ops on the internet. But of course, she got caught. And now she's trying to cover her tracks because she knows she did a bad thing. But I digress. I feel like I've said disorder at least 400 times in this video. So I guess that's gonna wrap this one up. If you like what I do, leave a comment, rate, and subscribe. If you want to support me in a more personal way, you can check out the Patreon link and the Teespring link in the description. The merch store hosted on Teespring, or, well, I guess it's actually Spring since they rebranded, now has new merch to accommodate the new design because I totally didn't get a cease and desist, I promise. All the big corporations love me. I'll have a video out soon about Chris Chan's jail letters, so as you know, I've got more content coming down the pipeline. But until then, I'll see you degenerates next time.
Oh, see, now that's bullshit. A bunch of shit comes through and changes you, and I don't get shit.